Yeah.
Good morning.
Become
I'll call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of our Zoning and Planning Committee. I'm Lisa Bender. I chair the committee. Today is August 11th, 2016. We have a quorum, including council members Reich, Goodman, Andrew Johnson, and Council President Johnson. We have 4 items on our agenda today. I think I'll pull item 3 because we have some questions for staff. So I'll start with the rest of the consent items. Item number 1 is a street vacation for part of 7th Avenue North, an application by Metro Transit. Item number 2 is approving an application for a rezoning at the property at 3333 41st Street East to allow for an industrial and residential use on that property. So it's adding the ILOD overlay district. Item number 4 is referring to staff an ordinance about the regulation of intentional communities. So I will see if anyone has any comments or wants to pull items 1, 2, or 4. Seeing none, I will move items 1, 2, and 4 from the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Those carry. So then we'll move to item number 3, which is the zoning definition of half stories. It's a small change to our ordinance, and council members just had a couple of questions about the technical details of this.
Good morning. Did you want me to walk through the ordinance, or did you have direct questions right away?
Yeah, if you could just give a brief overview of the purpose. I could also speak to it, but this is Peter Crandall.
Oh, I'm Peter Crandall. I'm a city planner with land use. Okay, so as you may remember, in August of 2014, the City Council adopted some revisions to the 1 to 4 unit residential buildings in the zoning code, which, as a part of that, amended the definition of what is considered a half story. That essentially removed part of the definition that required that half stories be located on buildings, on uses, or in districts with a 2.5 story maximum height limit. So this is currently how we define half stories. Essentially, a half story means that the roof rafters are within 2 feet of the floor joists on the adjoining floor below. And so it essentially reduces the bulk impact of what a half story would have on an adjoining property. We allowed these to happen on some properties that were more than 2.5 stories, thinking that those impacts would be reduced then to adjoining properties. But what we encountered in some projects were sort of bulkier, like 3.5 story, 4.5 story homes that really did not integrate well with the neighboring properties and with the predominant architectural style in the neighborhoods in which these projects were happening. And that really half-story constructions are generally found on 2.5 story buildings in Minneapolis, not so much on 3.5 story buildings. And so it was creating an incentive for people to design and build half-story constructions on buildings that were not congruent with the character of Minneapolis housing. So these are a couple examples. And you can see that the incongruence is pretty obvious there. So the text amendment itself is really just adding language back into that definition that requires that half stories be located on uses that have a 2.5-story height limit or in districts that have a 2.5-story height limit. They're not prohibited. You can still build a half-story construction, but they're treated like a full story. So they would still be subject then to any setback requirements therein.
Does anyone have questions for staff?
I just want to thank you for that explanation. You probably didn't know we were going to ask about it, but there are a lot of questions in the neighborhoods about this, and I think people think we're letting more of this bad stuff happen, and what we're doing is trying to stop it. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the chair, just even though we had time anyway, just to give that explanation. It makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
And thank you for that, Councilmember Goodman. I think all of the projects that are these examples are in my ward. There have been a number of them, and so we were able to work with staff to identify the sort of unintended consequence of this change that had come through the 1 in 4 updates that happened, a couple of years ago. So I mean, I think as Councilmember Reich and I and others kind of dig into the weeds of the comprehensive plan update and look at ways we can support this kind of infill development, I think we want to make sure that it's designed well, that it's lasting, that it's going to be something we want to have around for the next 50 years as we kind of do the next phase of development in our neighborhood. So I really appreciate this simple change. I think it'll make a big difference in how things go. So, anything else? I'll move then item number 3. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries, and that actually concludes our agenda today. Thank you.